Hello, welcome. Thanks for joining me. Day 5, creating a rolling chassis. It was always going to be a major day when I actually got a rolling chassis on the worktop. It leads me to think of all sorts of things for the next step, but that can wait. I'm having a much needed cup of tea after a very long, cold and busy day in my workshop cum garage. Main jobs were to drill the top tube to accept the main bolt for the steering, and at the back end of the bike to create spindles for the rear wheel and the swing arm pivot, and start to bolt them together rigidly and as square as I can get them. The steering bearings at the moment consist of metal washers, highly polished, and a bit of lubricant on them. They may evolve into nylon washers, or maybe even a simple ball bearing mechanism. There'll be no taper roller bearings for this variant of the bike. Taper roller bearings have been fitted to all my fast road bikes and race bikes, and they take great loads, but this isn't subject to that. My grandson Noah, for whom this is destined, will grow out of it very quick, and that'll be time to introduce race steering, race geometry. This has just got to have the look, the simplicity, so I can't blow the budget on sophisticated parts which don't enhance the experience at all. So that's the front end sorted. The actual bit of square section aluminium top tubing that sticks out the front is actually serving as a steering stop for left and right movement. Now, it's only a gimmick at the moment. I can remember riding bikes without steering stops on, and I've had many a bashed thumb as clip-ons get towards the petrol tank and your thumb gets in the way. Steering dampers help, but they don't stop a tank slapper. Some bikes just love to shake the heads, and if you're doing 90 plus, the last thing you want is your thumbs jamming against the petrol tank. Anyway, I digress. The front of the square section tubing will no doubt be modified, but not today. That gave me a working front end. I then moved to the rear, and this needed quite a few parts. I had to source spindles, which for now was just going to be screwed rod, varying sizes. I chose one that I had handily that suited the bearings in the back wheel, so that created itself really, and it was long enough to do the job, and I actually cut a length off later in the build. So that was the rear spindle. I mounted the left and right swinging arm onto this spindle after drilling both pieces bolted together to try and get as much accuracy as I could. So that meant they were both the same length, both with a hole at the right distance from the end for the wheel spindle. And that just left the swinging arm pivot. I call it a pivot. It's not going to pivot on this model, it's going to be locked up because, as I said before, there's no suspension except for the balloon tyres, and that's adequate for this race rep, the emphasis being on replica, not exactly accurate. So the width of the swinging arm, although it seemed quite wide, it was based on the fact that the rear wheel has a drive sprocket, a wide tyre and a disc brake. So that set the distance of the swinging arm, and I haven't got the facilities to start creating a swinging arm with multiple bends and curves, angles. It has to be quite simplistic. So it's a letter U with square corners at the U bends. Getting back to the build. Placing the left and right swinging arm on the spindle, moving the rear tyre into position, rear wheel into position, and blocking up the swinging arm. I then studied where it was going to intersect the seat post, the vertical. The position for drilling was pretty obvious after studying it, so I marked the vertical, marked the left and right swinging arm. I only had a thin piece of screwed rod, and in the back of my mind I'm considering maybe upping this to a larger one, but that'll mean ordering it. No big deal. I was just talking about visualization today. I wanted to create a rolling chassis so I can visualize how I'm progressing with the build. So the screwed rod was measured. I drilled suitable holes in the left and right swinging arm, again clamping them together so that the hole was going to be in the right position, and then drilled a suitable hole in the marked position on the vertical seat post. That left me with a gap between the seat post and each left and right swinging arm. I measured that and created some wooden blocks. These would aid visualization and help evolve the design. And they did the job. Any errors of alignment soon show up when you start bolting things together tightly. Temporary bolts were used in the seat post where it intersects the top tube, and those temporary bolts were to cause me a little bit of aggro later on, so they certainly want changing for decent bolts that I can tighten up and create something to work from. But they did the job for now. So the wooden blocks spacing the swinging arm correctly either side of the seat post. I established the length and the dimensions, went into my workshop cum garage and picked up a piece of tubing, thick walled, cut it to the same length as the wooden blocks, and Mark II spaces had evolved. It looks a better job. It certainly won't attract attention as wooden blocks would have done. The spaces were put together with the swinging arm, and it started to be so close to my rolling chassis target for the day. I needed one metal spacer just to bridge the gap between the swinging arm, just to take the weight off the swinging arm, because a single mounting point of the swinging arm pivot point is never going to stand the test of time. Weights involved are going to rotate about this pivot point, and I will eventually create a secondary device to mount this so the swinging arm is locked. But time to get the cine camera out, put up the green screen as a backdrop to take the focus off anything in the background and focus on the project instead. Slacken the supporting rope from my sky hook, and lo and behold, we have a rolling chassis. Hee hee! Yes, I'm over the moon. Major milestone achieved. Nowhere near perfected, but everything has to start somewhere, and this is my start. So, steering that works, steering locks to stop any hands getting jammed on full lock, and a back wheel that now is bolted into the chassis, a swinging arm ready for being locked up, and we have a rolling chassis. Hope you enjoyed the content today. It's been a long day. I nearly said hard day, but it's very enjoyable as progress reaches the goal you set yourself. It's very satisfying. So join me again soon for more on the build of Noah's Race Rep. Thanks for joining me.